Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Dead Space 2. Zealot difficulty, no upgrades, no damage, and no store. This is Chapter 6, and this is quite the odyssey. This is the hardest level so far. It's also the longest. It begins with a sequence of darkened residential areas that have been completely decimated by the scourge of the necromorph marker's influence, and all that is left is the debris, the human refuse that's now being reanimated, and a whole host of intricately lit candles and graffiti. So say what you want about, necrotized human flesh after death, it does know how to set the ambience, because it's a rather fetching atmosphere of... I wonder who it was. Do you think it was a single person, or do you think it was an accumulation? Because you spend this game in a sequence of chasing people, right? So, at the beginning, you're going up to that girl who's trying to help you, who betrays you. And then after that, you go in to find Ellie, who doesn't betray you, for once, which is nice. And then there's that psycho that's with you, who betrays you. And then there's the black dude, Tideman, I think he's called, who's kind of the... he's the guy in charge of everything, isn't he, on the sprawl, and who's kind of has the final say. And you end up screwing him over at the end as he tries to, actively betray you, even though he never really hid his intentions, did he? And we do a lot of that in this. A lot of the people on the sprawl seem to have wanted this to happen. Of course, the whole purpose of Isaac and this dude who's on the uplink right now being here is so that they can use the information that was in our minds to build the marker. And it's a pretty big marker too. Like, if you remember the first game, the original marker, quite a modest, quite an affordable, a durable marker for the person who's not going to show off too much. Whereas in this game, it's straight up peacocking of the most grandest sense. That's interesting. That dude's electric equipment turning on there as he's in kind of like a weird crab. But here's our first save section, and here is our first battle. This is a very, very difficult fight coming up. It begins with a fat, bloated enemy. The boomer of this game, this bloated abomination just here. And you can take your time if you want, shooting stuff at this dude to break his limbs. You don't have to use your ammunition. But after he dies, there's going to be another one on the opposite side of the room. And then there's going to be spawns of leapers. And the neighbourhood-friendly whiptails are going to make our life miserable. So I'm going to sit down in this corner, because I believe there's about 4 of them. But their spawns are a little bit awkward. And if you know anything about this enemy, you will know that they are incredibly fast. And if they jump, there's almost nothing you can do outside of stasising them. And it can oftentimes be quite tricky to do that, because even in stasis they can still register an active hit on you if you're not careful. But I prefer the other corridor on the other side of the room because it's a longer run up. But the reason I'm standing here is, do you notice how the door is blue over there? The moment that door goes blue, you can leave this room. And this is one of those fights where I would actively will people, if you don't want to deal with it and waste the ammunition, to just clear the way and get through that door. Because right now, the fat guy came to me and I haven't triggered the next of the leaper spawns, because the spawns here are a little bit weird. Sometimes they do it all the time, sometimes they don't. I noticed that the spawns right here were having trouble, and I decided to leave. But when you move over here, you can hear things happening. So did you hear it just then? So I'm expecting the creature to come now, but I think their pathing got stuck, or maybe they were on the walls, or they were being a bit passive. But I noticed an opportunity, and I decided to captivate on it, because this room sucks. I got all the way to the end of this room, and I got hit by a stasis leaper mid-leap. I was so pissed off, but when I retried, I got that particular opportunity, and I used it, and there's a good strategy to come from that. When that door goes blue, you can save all your ammo, just run past the fat guy and get out. But just know this, if there are any leapers alive and actively seeking you, you will not outrun them. It doesn't work that way. It's 100% like luck of the gods if you can get past them without being clipped, because they're just too accurate and too fast. And whenever you see that enemy, you fight them. You have to. There are rare instances of where you can afford to not fight that enemy. and they're the hardest enemy in the game, so if you can deal with them, you should be fine. But here is a corridor that's populated by the cysts. I call them ball sacks, for obvious reason, but they're an improvised mine that the necromorphs use, and you can use them to kill necromorphs too, which is one of the best features of them. I don't use too many cysts to do my work, not because I'm against it or anything, it's just because half the time I forget that I'm doing that and I end up dying to the cyst because I forget it's there. So, to avoid that inevitability, I get rid of them, even though there are a lot of fights that they're more helpful than they are a hindrance, and it's definitely a good strategy to use them when you're trying to preserve ammunition. The most interesting factor of these creatures is if you stand close enough to them, they will spit out their explosive in a suicide attempt to take you with them. You can then catch that and fire it at things, and it's a pretty good explosive. I'm going to do it later on in the run, but at this moment in time, I wasn't messing around with that. There are a lot of aspects of Dead Space that I remember, but I don't remember the timings to them, and that's why I'm a little bit reticent to do certain things at this point in the run, because I was still trying to get warmed up and reacquainted and everything. There's me pressing the wrong button to look at my equipment. So as you can see, I've got a ton of crap in here that's going to get sold at the shop. The only thing I care about is my plasma cutter rounds, and judging by the amounts that I had there, I'm rocking about 100 rounds, right? That was 4 sets of 25. So that is a lot of plasma cutter ammunition. If I could have kept that comfortably for the full game, I would have been laughing, but this game is going to escalate, and this is the chapter where that takes place. There is a lot of stuff going to happen in this one. But Chapter 7 is another level that's really, really difficult as well. They're usually quite manageable for the most, a lot of the areas, and then there are just certain moments that ramp it up big style. But I'm full again, so I'm going to have to chuck something out. There are instances where I've gone into my menu, guys, and I've left it out, but for the purposes of people understanding where I am in the grand scheme of the run, I'm going to keep some of them in so you can monitor my ammunition, and you can monitor what's going on. No doubt there'll be people who think I'm upgrading, and they think I'm buying ammo from the shop and things, but what can you do about those kind of individuals? They're going to exist, it's just how it works. I suppose it's one of those honour systems, isn't it? Like apparently how, is it the trams in Switzerland? The trams, I think, they work on an honour system where you pay as you get off, but you can actively not do it, which is pretty douchey, but I think the service is so useful that people don't mind doing it. So, this is a zero grav room. There are usually quite a decent amount of ammunition in these rooms. You want to get as much as you can for obvious reasons. This is where my gameplay is going to start to look a little bit crappy, because it doesn't control good at all, any of this. It's really, really awkward. And I'm going to reiterate it every time we enter these moments, but your mouse input right now is so bizarre. You'll notice that it looks like I'm swinging in loops around what I'm trying to aim at, and it's because it doesn't feel right. And that's one of the big problems with mouse aim. It's so much about feeling and about memory of motions and movements, that when anything is even remotely different, you feel it. And this happens on console as well, no doubt, but it's so noticeable with a mouse. Like, have you ever had anybody mess with your sensitivity on your desktop, and you've come to use your mouse, and it's weird, and you notice it immediately, something's wrong, because you have so much muscle memory of how much of a movement of your hand it takes to carry from the start bar to the recycle bin or something like that. All of this is programmed into your brain because you've done it so many times. And it's the same thing here, which is why these sections I found to be really frustrating. Right now, it's perfect because I'm on the ground. And all I'm doing here is I'm going to freeze the lurkers with my stasis, and then I'm going to punch them and stamp on them so I don't have to waste bullets. That's probably the best way to kill those enemies if you have no other options, but just bear in mind, if they spawn their tentacles, they can do a whip attack, and of course you'll take damage. This room is quite kind though. There is a couple spikes that can instantly kill the lurkers, and there's also a fire hydrant that will, a fire extinguisher, which will enable you to hurt them at least. But all the sections where you do not have oxygen, and you have to rely on your suit, you might worry about perhaps the oxygen not being enough to achieve some of the stuff that's needed to be done in the game. Well, I can comfortably assert that that's not the case. One of the things that I always found to be quite intimidating in the first game especially was these sections where you couldn't breathe, because they used it more of a mechanic, didn't they? There was those rooms in like the med bay, I think it was, or maybe hydroponics, one of those areas where you were going between oxygen machines and actively fighting. And I always found that room to be a very scary room, because monitoring resources like breathing and enemies and everything was always super intimidating to me. And there's a part of me that's really glad that this game hasn't gone that way, but it must be said, it was nerve-wracking, right? Same when you're being hunted by the hunter. All those sequences made for really intimidating gameplay, and I think that's why when I think of Dead Space 1, it's a game that did scare me a lot. It's a game that the atmosphere I felt was really, really good, and it is a game that I look back on with, you know, a little trepidation, a little bit of anxiety, because it is a scary game to me. And I know there's those people that are, oh, I wasn't scared at all, and it didn't bother me, and that's fine. I get that. But it bothered me, and that's what's important. I found it really atmospheric and really, really interesting because of it. And going back to it when, you know, I do a run like this, if I do go back to the first game, for instance, if this run does really well on YouTube and you'd like to see more of it, then I'd definitely look into doing the first one. But when I go back, there's going to be a part of me that's the same when I go back to Resident Evil 4, or when I go back to, you know, any of the games that scared me when I was younger. Castlevania 64 is a game that scared me when I was younger, and I'll always remember it, which might sound like a crazy one to you people if you played that game, but it was the garden maze with the invincible chainsaw guy and those dogs, because you couldn't kill them, and there's just something terrifying, innately terrifying, at knowing that the enemy cannot be felled, and I think that's one of the reasons why the hunter is so effective as an enemy. But this is the manipulation of the stalkers. Every time you trip this boundary, they move. It's almost like they have to do it. They can't not do it. And you can use this as an opportunity to take your time and pop shots at their arms and legs. Throw things at them, do whatever you want to do to them. I'm just kind of testing the waters right now to see what I can get away with, but I found this really fascinating, and I was going to do a video where I showed this, and I put something like, you know, you put your right leg in, your left leg in, blah 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 blah, da 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 da, and mock it in some way like that. But when you think about it, as silly as this looks, this is legit. This is 100% guaranteed manipulation of an enemy that's quite dangerous. And traditionally, when you come through the stalker rooms on a normal playthrough, stalkers aren't a problem, because you have guns that can put them down really quickly and you don't have to worry. Like, I use the Seeker Rifle against almost all the stalkers once I get it, and the Seeker Rifle's amazing. You can shoot them anywhere and they'll die, and it's super effective and you never even notice it. But when you don't have those like, look at that, the game is giving you mines at this point. Because of course there's a mine weapon in this game. You can just put a bunch of mines in the areas that they love to run from and just wait for them to kill themselves. There's a ton of ways of doing it. That's interesting too, the two guys with no legs come bounding forward and don't do much. Additionally, there is a time when the stalkers will poke their head out and they'll taunt. There's the standard, I'm here, and then they pull it back, and then there's the other time where they make the noise, they make the raptor noise, which I think is a nice little homage to the sound that the raptors make in the kitchen when they're trying to communicate with each other. But this enemy is quite intriguing because it reminds me a lot of those enemies in The Last of Us. You know, the ones in the hotel when you turn the power on, who have to jump scare you before they can seemingly attack you. So they're an enemy that for some reason will never attack you instantly. They have to shit you up first, make you jump, and then they come for you. And I think these guys work on a very similar principle, because obviously they have to taunt before they can come for you. The guys on the ground, when they don't have any legs, they are not held by that reasoning. They can do what they want. But did you see him just then? I poked his head around. He has to do that before he can attack me. And I don't know if I mentioned in my first walkthrough of this game, but it's a lot like killer whales. If you know too much about killer whales, you'll know that they hunt in packs. They kill in packs and they feed in packs. These lumbering bullies of the sea, basically, these nasty predators, especially the juvenile ones, the ones who are, you know, like John Travolta, just Saturday Night Fevering it as much as he can. And because they're in a pack, when they want to claim something, they do a drive-by. They will swim intimidatingly past their target, and that's saying to the rest of the pack that this is mine, guys, don't go for this one. They're claiming it for themselves for their kill, and then when they swing back in a second time, it's dead. It's getting attacked. And these creatures work on a similar system. And I think the only way you can force it to work differently is, of course, if they have no legs, but also if you push a spawn. If I were to run through this room and try and get to the door, there's a chance that I could probably do it, but there's also a chance that they would try to cut me off, because the game seems to have this safeguard in place. It's a fail-safe to make sure you don't skip this encounter. Although I'm certain it's probably possible, because people do crazy things. But it's the same with the creature that's mounted to the wall with the tentacles from the first game. If you try to get close to him, it has an instant kill technique that I don't even really know what happens. It's a little bit like when you kill the pukers sometimes and you just die because they have maybe an AoE as they pass away. But I've stasised one of those wall dudes, ran towards him trying to punch him, and you just fall to pieces. You just get jibbed. And I don't really understand that. But it's one of those things, isn't it? It's an enemy that you're not designed to be close to. It's a little bit like Nicole. When you attack Nicole, she flinches. But you know, if you're close enough and you shoot her, she cancels out of the flinch into the grab that kills you. Because I was trying to punch her when I was first got there as the final boss to see if I could do more damage, because I was getting a bit annoyed. And you can stasis her, and I think you can go close to her then. But when she comes out of that, you cannot be close to her at all, or she just get killed. There's no fighting it, there's no quick time event, it's just a grab of doom. But there was our second encounter with Stalkers, sorry. Not too bad. The Stalkers are very predictable and very controllable, but they're also intimidating, because they don't fight like anything else in the game. And I kind of like the idea of that, because as much as I love this game, and I think it's got a lot of cool enemies, I think it could have done with more. I think there should have been more presets for necromorphs, just to mix it up a little bit. And it would be really nice if when you shot the necromorphs and you dismorphed them, if they transformed a little bit to make it harder to shoot them. Because it's one of the things that I've always talked about when I've covered this series. Some of the information that I was first reading when I was excited for the game, when they first showed footage of Dead Space 1, and it was Isaac walking through that dark corridor holding, I think it was the line gun, and you could see the lasers from the gun kind of cutting and swathing the way through the darkness as he was moving. And you saw the abominations and stuff, and it was like, oh, this looks really cool. But on one of the interviews that I read, and I might have even made this up, you know, just after memories of looking back, but I could have sworn I read a feature where they were talking about this idea of when you shoot these creatures, they don't interact the way you expect them to, and they transform into greater abominations. And I'm thinking the Thing, you know, how every single thing that happens to those people has some new transformation that enables it to survive. And I thought the enemies were going to do that. Like, if you shot their arm off, they were going to grow more legs, or if you shot their leg off, they'd grow more arms. I thought it would be dynamic and just grotesque. And it is, in its way, but once you play it, you realise it's a lot more reserved than somebody like me was thinking. And it could be for budget reasons, it could be for vision reasons, but it seems kind of interesting, doesn't it, that almost all of the necromorphs kind of adhere to this homogeneous two slashy arms, and that's kind of it design. And there are different ones. There's the one with the ribcage that's extended. Of course, there's the female one. There's those mining guys later on that look like they're in straitjackets. But I think they could have gone nuts with it, and they didn't. Which I would have loved to have seen an evolution of that. And I can't really remember Dead Space 3 too much, but I remember the fisherman ghosts from Scooby-Doo and their ice picks, which they're obsessed with. I have no idea why fisherman ghosts would be obsessed with ice picks, but alas. So this encounter is pretty tricky as well, as I breeze past the first few parts of it and use the spit from the female necromorph to look at how damaging that was. Now imagine if I'd been using it a little bit more effectively throughout this run. I could have saved me a couple of rounds. But be careful of the cysts. I was doing this commentary earlier, and I left a couple deaths in because of the cysts, just completely forgetting that they were there, running forward and getting killed. There's also a really sneaky necromorph coming up where when you approach the door of the Titan station, it kind of sneaks up behind you. I'm not entirely sure where it comes from because it's a silent spawn. But I turned around there, I saw the puker, I saw the female necromorph. The puker killed the female necromorph for me with his incredible puke. Yeah, I still haven't learned that I should be using it yet because I'm being stubborn. And it makes so much sense to do it, but I guess I was just too cavalier at this point. Just wanted to shoot stuff. And it must be said that shooting things in this game is fantastic. That's really dumb as well. I love it how when they're dead, you can pull every limb off their body before you grab their body sometimes. And the limbs don't give you loot, so I don't know why it lets you do that. Especially considering that the limbs, unless they have a point on them, are not classed as weapons, so they don't do enough damage. And it'd be really nice if they did, especially with the babies that are coming up. I think just throwing anything at the babies coming up should be enough to kill them. I don't think you should have to hit them in the face, like twice, for it to count as a kill, because they're just a really stupid enemy that you can't do much to, and all they do is steal ammunition from you. But we're entering into the elementary school right now, and this is where things like to get a little bit creepy. I never found this to be too creepy personally because I played Fear 2, and in Fear 2 I think it had a really creepy school in that game, and it kind of it steeled me towards creepy schools. That's creepy when it shows you a potential spawn point for the crazy puke babies, pus babies or whatever they're called. But if you shoot them in the head, you can then use their corpse to fire it as an improvised grenade. And you can hit them with objects, like for instance if you pick up one of the baby's heads and fire it at one of the baby's heads, if you do that you can kill them quite effectively. But picking up what you want at times can be almost as awkward as getting a Pokeball in an ocean of Mr. Saturns, so you need to be really careful. Like right now, all I want to do is hit this dude in the face, and he's getting way too close, so I end up spending ammunition. I feel like one hit from anything should set them off. I feel like it would be much better and much more fun. But I understand why it doesn't, because this is survival horror. One of the reasons that survival horror works is because fundamentally you are not playing a capable character. That's the reason why Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space aren't that scary to some people, because the person you play as is immensely capable. If you go back to something like a Silent Hill, your guy just isn't that capable. And that's where the fear comes from, because you know you can't deal with everything. In this game, especially in the conditions that I'm using, like, there is no fear because you know you can smash everything. And if you're somebody that plays it for fear, like, there was a guy who left a comment on my Evil Within 2 walkthrough, and he was saying that he wouldn't play with the FOV as wide as I played with it, because to him, a lot of the fear that's achieved is achieved by lacking, kind of nerfing the player's ability to see their surroundings. And I completely understand what he means, because when the FOV is really high, especially like the first Evil Within when it had the black bands so you couldn't see anything and it made everything super awkward, it does add fear, it does add challenge. But for a player such as myself, I play these games for the gameplay loops, and to be good at the gameplay loops, and to do the encounters in a satisfying way. So for me, every single possible advantage that I can get is something that I want. Of course, I don't want to cheat, and I don't want to have too many advantages that make it too easy, but I want to be as capable and as efficient as I physically can be. So if that means turning up my sensitivity, that's what I do. If that means turning up the brightness a little bit to see, that's what I do. Like, I even go as far as I turn off depth of field, I turn off motion blur, I turn off all these things that make my vision harder to see the game, because I don't want the game to look like a movie. I want to see everything perfectly, so I know exactly where the threats are and exactly how to isolate and destroy them. And that's how I approach pretty much every game. I turn off vibration in first-person shooters because I don't want anything to affect my aim. Like, of course that doesn't really matter on mouse and keyboard because I don't think that even works, but on a controller, the vibration can subtly affect your hands. And a lot of people will hear this and be like, what is he talking about? That sounds stupid, because you play with vibration and you're very good. But trust me guys, there is a subtle difference and a subtle effect on your ability to aim. It's one of those strange things. But at the end of the day, it's all preference, so there's no right or wrong answer. But here is our first black puker, and this is, I think, when I'm going to use puke, because I throw a bin at this guy, and the bin does nothing, and I get a little frustrated. So he does the puke animation, I catch it, throw it back, and I believe that's when I have my epiphany. There it was. And boom! There you go, Chris. How hard was that? Look how much damage it just did. You should never shoot them ever again. I hope you learnt something, Mr. Brain. But yeah, guys, learn from my mistakes. Don't shoot the puke, man. There's no reason. And this is pretty interesting too. There is a puker, sorry, not a puker, an infector coming up. But as long as you step on the bodies, he can't infect anything. So instead of opting to bring new necromorphs into the fold, he will opt to bum rush you, like some kind of heel in a WWE event. So he comes parading down, interrupting the match. But he's a little flappy bat manta ray thing, so you just shoot it in the face a few times and he folds over. But this is a really interesting fight, because I was quite nervous for this. Because I couldn't quite remember the spawns. I knew there was a lot of kids going to attack me, but I couldn't quite remember exactly how it worked. And an easy way to spot the attempts it took me to record each section is how well I know the spawns. So for instance, what you're watching now is a first attempt. I got this on my first try. Some of the stuff later on, you're really going to see that it wasn't a first try, because I'm going to know where they're coming and I'm going to have a really, really cool setup for things. But everything that was just improvised and worked is going to look a little bit less planned. And this is one of those moments. Because I know they're coming from in front, but I don't know from where. It turns out it's from the balcony of the that seating system over there. Are they called bleachers, I think they're called? We didn't have them in my school. I always associate them with America. But they come from underneath the bleachers and from on top through the vents. And mouse and keyboard, ladies and gentlemen, as I missed this guy twice. There he is. There's the infector coming in. All you need is to do the Stone Cold Steve Austin glass-breaking intro, right? As that dude starts running towards the ring and he gets wrecked. But that's the end of the fight. But I remember this being really difficult because, of course, I played it many years ago. And then this curtain's going to pull back, more kids are going to turn up, and I'm going to use this to freeze them. And I didn't need to use this because it's incredibly powerful stasis, but there you go, they're all dead. And now you just get to watch them in slow motion as they fall down. It's like something out of a John Woo movie, right? But things like that are capable on console, but you have to really, really, really practice to get that shit down. Whereas that was one attempt. That's how sharp you are when you're playing at a higher hertz, when you're playing at a higher frame rate, when you're playing, you know, with the visuals looking this nice and the controls feeling this responsive. Like, I cannot sell this experience enough, guys. And if you're one of those people who doesn't like mouse and keyboard and doesn't feel like they're very good with it, nobody does at first, guys. I'm still not good with mouse and keyboard. I have so much more to improve, and so like the path to where I want to be is long and arduous and wrought with disappointment, but every time you use it, you're getting better. It's a slow incremental improvement process, and everybody can do it. It's nothing to do with me, it's nothing to do with you, it's just literally one of those skills. Originally, we couldn't stand up right. Standing up was hard. We crawled everywhere and we sat down and we cried and our parents picked us up. But nowadays, you don't really think about how easy it is to stand up, do you? You just do it. And there are a whole host of intricate and awesome ways to stand up, acrobatic ways to stand up, all kinds of insanity that you've achieved. Just like that. Mouse is no different. Same with keyboard. Keyboard's awkward as fuck. I still look down at the keyboard sometimes when it asks me to press something weird. I don't know why I do it, because I can touch type, yet when it comes to playing a game I have to have a look. And luckily I have a pretty nice keyboard with some fibre optic colouring behind it on its switches, so I can see in the dark, which is cool. But it's just one of those skills. This is a pretty long video too, guys, so I hope you're not struggling too much with it, because it is a lengthy chapter. And this is one of those sequences where Nicole talks to you and it's completely unskippable. I was tempted to trim this part out, but because I'm moving around and doing stupid shit, I kept it in. But traditionally I would remove this. I think it's because I was stepping on the bodies, but there you go, that's the end. And then the elevator opens up. I wonder if that's masking loading right there, or if it's just narrative for the sake of narrative, because I still don't rightly understand Nicole's role in this game. Like, maybe I understood it back in the day, but I don't anymore, because initially she's tormenting you, and Isaac is holding on to her because of guilt and because it's all he has left and everything. Then he accepts it, goes through his grieving process, and she stops being, you know, Conan, Rave, glowstick eye version of Nicole and turns into sentimental Nicole, and then the kind of super best friends high-fiving, and then she sweet talks you into getting to the marker and then tries to kill you. So it's that weird thing of like, I still don't really understand what she does in this game. She's bad, we know she's bad, and at the end she inevitably betrays us to prove she's bad. So there must be more subtlety, maybe in the audio logs or something. But I just don't know. What I do know is that, can you imagine if there was co-op in this game and player 2 got to play as Ellie? That would be sweet. Playing this game with co-op would be amazing. Because then they could increase the amount of necromorphs. Something along those lines. That'd be really sweet. Like, that's what sucked about Dead Space 3. Like, it was the worst game to have co-op in it, because you could tell it wasn't really designed around it, and all the shit that wasn't very good. Like, what kind of co-op game completely ignores the second character in every single sequence in the game? And then at the end they try and make out like he's a fucking imaginary. God damn, that game makes me sad. But this is a brute, and once again, folks, I was tempted to trim all this introduction out so I could get straight to the fight, but it did have me picking things up, and there are people who care about setups for certain scenarios. Look at the aliasing on this game as well. It's interesting how it looks so obvious to me now, but back in the day, I don't even think I knew what aliasing was. I just used to call it Renoa's legs. But it's a definite thing, right? You can see it so much when you're used to games looking smoother, because they have more sophisticated anti-aliasing technology. But I think it adds a charm. It's kind of like PlayStation era games. So you can either shoot off the brute's leg or shoot off his arm. Whichever one you want to go to is up to you. It still takes a decent amount of damage regardless. And then once you've done that, he'll try and spit this blob at you. And this blob is an explosive that does high damage to the brute, but it has weird detection. If it doesn't explode and he doesn't react, it means you didn't hit the right spot, and it does nothing. And I can't quite understand how an AoE explosive can do nothing. To me, it seems weird. But if you hit him with, I think, 5 or 6 of these, he'll die. But if you keep messing up like that, it doesn't do anything. So this lasts ages, and it's not really scary, it's not really interesting, it's just kind of, what the fuck is going on? And it's me, it's 100% my detection, I'm not throwing it correctly, but I feel like I should be getting hits here, even though I'm not doing it right. So you'll notice I tried to turn a little bit to compensate, and that worked. But there are times when you do this and it still misses. So you just gotta be careful, I guess. And there you go. Brute is down, pretty simple. I tested his arms and his legs, and both of them take about a clip and a half with the unupgraded plasma cutter. Depending on if you're taking on a standard brute or a black brute. The black brute at the end takes like 2 clips, he's a knob. But they're big enemies and they take a beating. And you're going to love that room when you come back, because the second time we go into that room is probably one of the hardest fights in the game. And luckily you can skip it if you're not interested in taking it on, but I wanted to do it. And the nightmares that I could tell you about that room, really, really strange. Anyhow, here's our buddy on the wall. I don't know this guy's name. I should really Google that. I'm going to call him Chest Fucked, because that's exactly what I'm doing. It's like a reverse chest burster, right? I'm getting in there with the plasma. And I'm going to come back now and pick up the rest of the loot. The reason I did this, folks, is because I picked up all the loot, and then I got hit. And I always get frustrated having to pick everything back up. So for the strategy, I pushed into the room and killed him, and then I can come back for it now. I know it's done. So it's one of those things. That's one of the problems with doing stuff that's no damage. No damage isn't necessarily the most difficult thing to do. A lot of the times it's just kind of an annoying thing. Like, there's Node Room in this game that when you break the crates, they release those little shitbangers that grab you. And because I didn't want to be grabbed or hit or anything in this run, even though they didn't do damage to me, I had to restart. Which is really frustrating, because a Node Room is supposed to be a safe room, and they put stupid, like, flippy-floppy pancake monsters in it. Not cool, game. But that's the end of the mission, guys. That one is a really challenging one. The next one is really challenging as well, so I hope to see you in that video. But thank you very much for watching, and you take care now.